I never thought I'd feel this exposed in my own apartment, but there I was, sitting on my bed with my journal open in front of me, heart pounding like I'd just been caught doing something I shouldn't. Except the truth was, I hadn't been the one who opened it, not until today. My roommate Jamie had. And honestly, I'm still trying to figure out if I should be furious, mortified, or weirdly relieved. For some context, I'm Alex. I just turned 26, work in graphic design, and live in this cramped but cozy 2-bedroom downtown with Jamie, who's been my roommate for about 6 months now. When I moved in, I figured the worst that could happen was sharing a shower schedule or fighting over the thermostat. But nope, apparently you never really know someone until they read your private thoughts. Jamie's this tall, effortlessly charming guy with that kind of smile that doesn't even realize it's disarming. He's also the kind of person who keeps his stuff pretty much to himself, so we don't really pry into each other's lives. We're friendly, sure, but I never imagined he'd cross a line like this. It all started last weekend. I had to fly out to visit my family. Thanksgiving, awkward conversations, the usual. I left Friday afternoon expecting the apartment to be quiet, maybe a little lonely. Jamie said he'd be around, but honestly, I didn't think much of it. I don't usually lock my bedroom door. It's not like I'm hiding anything explosive. Just personal stuff, you know? The kind of things you only write down when you think no one else will read them. So when I got back last night, everything seemed normal at first. Jamie was on the couch watching some documentary about deep-sea creatures, which honestly was kind of his thing. I dropped my bag, headed to my room, and that's when I saw it, my journal. Open. On my desk. Pages splayed like someone had been flipping through it casually. I swallowed hard and flipped through it, feeling this weird mix of betrayal and panic. Those pages held my deepest thoughts, insecurities, and yeah, that stupid crush on someone I'd never admitted out loud. And now, they were no longer just mine. Jamie noticed me looking at it and shuffled over, trying to act casual but failing miserably. "Hey man, I saw it on your desk and just looked," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, eyes darting away. Looked? Like it was nothing? I wanted to say something, but honestly, I was too stunned. "What did you see?" I finally asked, my voice uneven. He hesitated. "Stuff about you. About me. Actually." That's when I realized this was way bigger than just a breach of privacy. Somehow, Jamie knew things about me. Things I thought were locked away safe. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one feeling exposed. I sat down, heart still racing, and said, "Okay, you owe me an explanation." Because if he read my journal, then the least he could do was tell me why. And what he said next, well, it changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, I just want to rewind a little and explain why I even kept a journal in the first place, and why it's full of things I never imagined anyone else would ever read. Because this whole mess started long before Jamie was even here. Long before I realized that sometimes the people closest to you might just be the ones who see you most clearly. So why the journal? Well, I started writing it during my last year of college. I'm not a huge talker when it comes to my feelings, more of the silent type, I guess. But once I put pen to paper, suddenly all the tangled thoughts made sense. It became this safe space where I could be brutally honest without worrying about judgment. I wrote about everything. My family headaches, the pressure of figuring out what I wanted to do with my life, and yeah, pretty extensively about this guy I'd met who ended up completely wrecking me. His name's Ethan. I met him in a coffee shop back when I was still figuring out if I was ready to admit I liked guys at all. Weirdly enough, Ethan's one of those people who just seem to glow even when they're sitting quietly, scrolling on their phone. I never actually told him how I felt, never dared, but I wrote about it endlessly. My journal's basically a museum of my failed attempts at getting a clue. Anyway, back to Jamie. When he said he'd read stuff about me and him, I was confused and curious in equal parts. "About you and me?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Jamie shrugged, a little embarrassed. "Yeah, there's this part where you wrote about that time we got drunk, and you almost kissed me." I blinked. "Wait, what? I did write about that?" The memory suddenly flashed back. The night a few weeks ago, when we'd both had too much wine, sitting on the couch talking about random stuff until the conversation got weirdly intimate. I'd leaned in, close enough to maybe cross the line, but we stopped just in time. "That happened?" I asked, half laughing, half stunned. Jamie smiled a little, but it wasn't exactly lighthearted. "Yeah, and honestly, I didn't know you felt that way until I read it. The room felt smaller somehow. It was like this secret I'd been guarding had been ripped out and handed over. But at the same time, hearing Jamie say he noticed it too made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't quite explain. I swallowed and said, "Jamie, why didn't you just ask me? Why read my journal instead?" He looked down at the floor, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. "I don't know. I guess I was scared. I thought maybe if I read it, I'd understand better how you felt. But then, I felt like I was betraying your trust." That honesty caught me off guard. I hadn't expected Jamie to be so vulnerable. "Okay," I said softly, "but now what? You know things about me that I never told anyone." Jamie looked up, eyes searching mine. I guess I felt the same way. Like maybe I've been ignoring something obvious. Because, Alex, I've been feeling the same thing. My heart did this weird flip-flop. "You have?" He nodded. "Yeah. I've been pretending it was nothing. Just roommate stuff. But it's not. Not anymore." For a second, I couldn't speak. The air between us shifted, charged but quiet. Then Jamie laughed nervously and said, "God, this sounds so messed up when I say it out loud." I smiled despite myself. Messed up or not, it's real. That night we talked for hours, not just about what was in my journal, but about everything. The awkward moments, the hopes, the fears. It felt like a long overdue confession, the kind that's messy but necessary. But here's the thing, the journal wasn't just about feelings. There were also parts where I was brutally honest about my past mistakes, my insecurities, and the times I'd felt utterly alone, even living with someone else. I was scared Jamie would see me differently after all that. Instead, he listened. No judgment. Just this quiet understanding that made the weight on my chest lift a little. After that night, things didn't magically fix themselves. We had a lot to figure out, boundaries to set, and feelings to sort through. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I wasn't alone in this. Like maybe the messy, confusing parts of me were okay to share. And you know what? Jamie ended up writing in my journal too. Not because he had to, but because I think he wanted me to know that he wasn't just reading my story. He wanted to be part of it. I never thought I'd say this about a roommate, but sometimes the people who stumble into your life unexpectedly turn out to be exactly what you didn't know you needed. Now, whenever I see that journal sitting on my desk, open or closed, it's not just a book of secrets, it's a symbol of something new, something real. So yeah, my roommate read my journal. It was awkward as hell, but it was also the start of something I never saw coming. And honestly, I'm kind of glad for it. After that night, things between Jamie and me took on a different vibe, like we'd crossed some invisible line. But instead of making things weird, it made everything feel more honest. We still joked around, argued over dumb stuff like whose turn it was to take out the trash, and shared the occasional pizza. But there was this undercurrent now, a kind of unspoken acknowledgement that we both felt something more complicated than just roommates. One evening about a week later, Jamie and I were sitting on the balcony, nursing beers and watching the city lights blink on one by one. It was chilly, early fall, just the right kind of night for awkward conversations and quiet moments. You ever think about what it means? Jamie asked out of nowhere, swirling the foam off the edge of his bottle. "What means?" I asked, trying not to sound like I was overthinking it. "This, us, what does this even mean? Because I don't want to mess things up, but I also don't want to pretend nothing's there." I laughed nervously. Honestly, I have no clue. I mean, I've spent so long pretending this was just some silly crush, or that it was better to keep things to myself. But now, everything feels like it's moving too fast and not fast enough at the same time. Jamie smirked. "You're great at making things confusing." "Thanks," I said, rolling my eyes. "Right back at you." We both laughed, but there was an honesty in the air that made me want to lean closer, say something I'd been holding back for a while. "Jamie," I started, then stopped myself. My throat felt dry. He looked at me, waiting. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't want to be just roommates anymore. I want to see where this goes. If you're willing. He smiled in that way that made me forget about all my worries. I'm willing, he said simply. That night was the first time we kissed. Awkward at first, because neither of us had ever navigated this in such close quarters before. Jamie's hands were tentative, like he was afraid to break whatever fragile thing we'd just started building. But as the kiss deepened, the tension between us melted away, and I realized how much I'd wanted that moment without even admitting it to myself. Things weren't magically perfect after that. There were still moments of uncertainty. Like the time Jamie got quiet for days after a miscommunication. Or when I caught myself spiraling over whether I was moving too fast or not fast enough. But we talked. We really talked. And that's what made all the difference. One Saturday, a few weeks after that first kiss, Jamie invited me to this little art show downtown. It wasn't anything fancy, just some local artists showing their work at a tiny gallery. I didn't expect much, but Jamie seemed excited, so I went along. Walking there, he squeezed my hand and said, "I want to show you something." Inside the gallery, surrounded by canvases splashed with color, Jamie led me to a corner where a small painting hung. It was a portrait of two guys sitting on a couch, one leaning into the other, both smiling like they were exactly where they wanted to be. "Did you paint this?" I asked, surprised. Jamie nodded, cheeks coloring. "Yeah, I've been trying to get back into painting again. I guess you're kind of my muse." I felt a rush of warmth spread through me. "It's amazing, Jamie. I mean, it's us." He laughed softly. "Kind of. I wanted to capture how safe I feel when I'm with you. Like, no matter what's going on outside, that little bubble we have is real." I looked at the painting and then back at him, my heart full. "I feel that too." After the art show, we grabbed some late-night tacos and talked about everything. Our dreams, the stupid fears we'd both been carrying around. Even the journal, which by that point had become this weird symbol of how we went from strangers sharing an apartment to something way more. One thing I never expected was how much Jamie's presence started to change my life outside the apartment. I found myself smiling more, actually looking forward to coming home after work. And when Ethan, the guy from the coffee shop, the one who was the subject of so many of my journal entries, texted me out of the blue asking to catch up, I was surprised how little butterflies I felt. I told Jamie about it, and instead of jealousy, he just grinned and said, "Sounds like you're moving on." That was probably the biggest relief of all. There was this Saturday afternoon when we were sprawled on the couch, half watching some random movie neither of us really cared about, and Jamie just reached over and tangled his fingers with mine. "Do you think we'll look back on this and laugh?" he asked quietly. I smiled. "Maybe, but I think this is the beginning of something worth remembering. And honestly, I can't wait to see where it goes from here." Because sometimes, the people who stumble into your life when you least expect it end up turning everything upside down in the best possible way. A few weeks after that taco night, things between Jamie and me settled into this comfortable rhythm that I didn't even know I was craving. It wasn't just the big moments, the kisses, the whispered conversations at 2 a.m., but the little ones, like the way he'd steal my hoodie when I wasn't looking, or how I'd find random Post-it notes stuck to the fridge reminding me to drink water or take a break. But, of course, nothing's ever that simple. One morning, I woke up to find Jamie already in the kitchen, making coffee. He looked up, smiled, and handed me a mug without saying a word. I took it, still half asleep, and that's when I noticed something different in his expression. It was softer, but also a little tense. "What's up?" I asked, sliding onto a bar stool. He hesitated, like he was trying to choose his words carefully. "I've been thinking about something. About us. About how fast everything's moving." I blinked. "Fast? I thought we agreed. Fast and not fast enough was our official motto." Jamie chuckled, but the nervous edge was still there. "Yeah, but I mean, I guess I'm worried. What if this is just a thing because we live together? What happens when things get real?" I took a sip of my coffee and looked at him. "You mean like when it's not just us hanging out on the couch or sneaking kisses in the kitchen?" He nodded. "Exactly." I reached out and took his hand. "Jamie, I get it. I was scared too. But you know what? I think we owe it to ourselves. to find out where this goes. Not because we share rent or because it's easy, but because we want to. He squeezed my hand back, and for a moment, everything felt right. But then, the unexpected happened. Later that day, I got a text from Ethan. Yeah, the same Ethan who used to be my coffee shop crush and my journal's unintentional star. He was back in town for a couple of weeks and wanted to meet up. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling this strange knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just about Ethan. It was about what it meant for Jamie and me. Was I ready to confront parts of my past while navigating this new, fragile thing with Jamie? Could I be honest with both of them? That night, I decided to tell Jamie. "Hey," I said, sliding onto the couch where he was half watching a movie. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. "What's up?" I got a message from Ethan. I said slowly. He's in town and wants to catch up. Jamie's face didn't change much, but I could see the tension around his eyes. "Oh," he said. "Okay." There was silence, and then Jamie spoke again, quieter this time. "Do you want to see him?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think I do." Jamie got up and grabbed a blanket, wrapping it around both of us as he sat back down. "Just promise me you'll tell me if anything happens. I know your past is part of who you are, and I don't want to pretend it isn't." I smiled, feeling lucky and a little overwhelmed all at once. "I promise." Over the next few days, I met up with Ethan. It was strange, but also familiar. We talked about old times, laughed about stupid memories, and honestly, it felt good to have that closure I didn't know I needed. But every time my phone buzzed, I was hoping it was Jamie checking in, reminding me that what we had was real. When I told Jamie how it went, he listened without a hint of jealousy, just this quiet support that made me realize maybe I'd never been this lucky. But then, a week later, something unexpected happened. Jamie and I were at a local bar celebrating a small project win at work. The atmosphere was loud, crowded, full of that Friday night energy. We'd had a couple of drinks and the music was pulsing through the room. Suddenly, Jamie leaned in and whispered, "Dance with me?" I laughed. "You? Dancing?" He grinned. "Hey, I'm full of surprises." We made our way to the small dance floor, and for the first time, I really saw Jamie let go. No awkwardness, no hesitation, just pure, genuine joy. We moved together, laughing, bumping into each other, completely in sync. As the night went on, I realized something important. Whatever uncertainties we faced, moments like this, raw, unfiltered and shared, were the ones that made all the risks worth it. On the walk home, under the glow of streetlights, Jamie slipped his hand into mine without asking, and I didn't want him to let go. "Hey," he said softly, "thank you for being brave enough to take this chance with me." I looked at him, feeling everything I'd kept buried for so long rise to the surface. "No thank you," I said, "for reading my journal. For reading me." He smiled, a little shy, and squeezed my hand. That's when it hit me. Sometimes, the best kind of love is the one you never saw coming, born from vulnerability, trust, and a little bit of courage. And I'm ready to see where this crazy, beautiful journey takes us next. The days that followed that night felt like a weird mix of everything. Exhilarating, but also sort of scary in this quiet way. I kept replaying Jamie's words in my head. "Thank you for being brave enough to take this chance with me." It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about what it meant to be vulnerable, to trust someone with parts of yourself you'd usually lock away. A few mornings later, I found myself waking up earlier than usual. The kind of early where the city is still half asleep and the sky has that soft blue glow. Jamie was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with his sketchbook, drawing something that looked like a tangle of lines but somehow made me want to ask what it was. I poured myself a cup of coffee and slid into the chair across from him. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual but feeling that flutter in my chest. Jamie looked up, eyes bright. "Morning. Want to see what I've been working on?" Curious. I leaned over, and he flipped the sketchbook around to show me a drawing of two figures sitting side by side, their shoulders touching, surrounded by all the little everyday things that made up our life. a coffee mug, a worn-out book, those ridiculous socks I always left lying around. "It's us," Jamie said quietly. I wanted to capture the ordinary stuff that feels important now. I smiled, touched more than I expected. "It's really good. You have a way with detail." He shrugged, but I could tell it meant a lot that I noticed. That morning, we talked about the future, which was both exciting and terrifying. We'd been so focused on what was happening right now that the idea of planning ahead felt suddenly huge. "Do you think we should tell people?" Jamie asked, biting his lip. "Friends? Family?" I hesitated. My family was still a minefield of awkwardness and unspoken things. I wasn't sure if they'd react well to me living with a guy, let alone the fact that we were this. But Jamie's family was more open, which made me feel a little hopeful. "I want to," I said slowly, "but I'm scared of messing it up." Jamie reached across the table and took my hand. "We'll do it together. One step at a time." That promise felt grounding, like a lifeline. A couple of evenings later, we decided to have a little coming out dinner with our closest friends. We invited a small group over, cooked way too much food, and tried to act like nothing was different, even though everything was. The moment came when Jamie raised his glass. "So there's something we want to share with you all." I felt my heart hammering in my chest as he went on, telling our friends about us, how we'd gone from roommates to something more, how it had been messy but real. To my relief, the response was warm. Lots of smiles, pats on the back, and a few jokes that made everyone laugh. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. After everyone left, Jamie and I collapsed on the couch, exhausted but happy. "I think that went better than I expected," I said, rubbing my eyes. Jamie smiled, resting his head on my shoulder. "Yeah, feels like we're building something real." But just when I was starting to believe that maybe everything was falling into place, life threw me a curveball. One Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from my sister. She sounded upset, her voice shaky with emotion. "Alex, Mom's in the hospital," she said. I felt the world tilt. "What? What happened?" "She had a stroke. It's bad, but the doctors say she might recover with time." The news hit me harder than I expected. My relationship with my family was complicated, distant, filled with old wounds I hadn't quite healed. But now, I had to face it head on. Jamie was already by my side when I hung up the phone. He pulled me into a hug without asking questions, just steady and solid. "We'll get through this," he said softly. The next few days were a whirlwind of hospital visits, family drama, and old ghosts resurfacing. I found myself torn between wanting to support my mom and desperately needing Jamie's support too. One night, after an especially tough day, I came home to find Jamie waiting with that sketchbook again. "I drew something," he said, flipping to a new page. It was a drawing of two figures holding hands, standing in front of a stormy sea, but the sky above them was breaking into clear blue. "Even when it's stormy, we're in this together," Jamie said. I felt tears sting my eyes, not just because of the drawing, but because of him and us and everything that was happening. That night, I finally let myself lean on. We talked long into the early hours about fear, hope, and what it meant to be vulnerable, not just with each other, but with ourselves. I realized then that love wasn't just about the easy moments or the butterflies. It was about standing together when everything else was falling apart. And as we held each other in that quiet darkness, I knew one thing for sure. Having Jamie by my side made me braver than I'd ever been. The weeks that followed my mom's stroke felt like we were living in a strange, suspended reality. Hospital visits became our new routine, the sterile smells and uncomfortable chairs replacing the comfort of our apartment. Jamie was my anchor through it all, showing up with coffee, holding my hand when I needed it, even sitting quietly beside me when I couldn't find words. One evening, after a particularly long day at the hospital, Jamie and I were walking back to the apartment. The city was draped in the soft glow of streetlights, but I felt numb, exhausted in a way that seeped into my bones. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Jamie squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to do it alone." I stopped, turned to him, and looked into those steady eyes that had become my safe place. "It's just, everything with my family is so complicated. I'm scared I'll mess this up, that I'm too broken to handle it." He pulled me into a hug, warm and reassuring. "You're not broken. You're human, and you're doing your best. That's enough." His words settled something inside me. For the first time in a long while, I let myself breathe. Back at the apartment, Jamie suggested we try something different to take my mind off everything. How about we cook dinner together? Something that's not hospital food or takeout. I smiled, grateful for the distraction. We rummaged through the kitchen, found some ingredients, and started cooking. As we chopped and stirred, the kitchen filled with laughter and that comfortable ease that reminded me why this was worth fighting for. In the middle of peeling potatoes, Jamie looked up at me, eyes shining. You know, I've been thinking about what comes next for us. I raised an eyebrow. Next? Like, after we survive your terrible cooking? He laughed. No, like, us. I know we've been taking things one day at a time, but I want to be more intentional. I want to plan things with you. Trip? Maybe move in together properly, not just as roommates. I nodded slowly. I want that too. It's scary, but I'm ready. We finished dinner and sat at the small table, sharing the meal we'd made. It felt like a milestone, simple but significant. But just as I was starting to feel hopeful again, my phone buzzed with a message that made my stomach drop. It was from Ethan. Hey Alex, hope you're well. Listen, I'm heading out of town soon, but if you want to catch up one last time, let me know. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to say yes, to close that chapter properly, but another part wondered what it would mean for Jamie. I put the phone down and looked at Jamie, who was watching me with quiet concern. I need to talk to you about something, I said. We sat down and I told him about Ethan's message. Jamie was silent for a moment, then nodded. If you want to see him, I'll support you. No secrets. Relief washed over me. I realized how lucky I was to have someone who wanted honesty above all else. The next day, I met Ethan for coffee. The conversation was easy, like slipping back into an old rhythm. But I also felt this new clarity. I saw Ethan not as this unattainable crush, but as a part of my past that helped me understand myself better. When I told Jamie about the meetup later, we both laughed at how nervous I'd been. It felt like a weight lifting. A few days after, Jamie surprised me with tickets to a weekend getaway, a cabin out of the city. We deserve this, he said with that grin I loved. The trip was exactly what we needed. No distractions, just us and the quiet woods. We hiked, cooked over a fire, and talked about everything from our favorite childhood memories to our biggest fears. One night, under a blanket of stars, Jamie took my hand. Alex, I know life's thrown a lot at you lately, but I want you to know I'm here. For the crazy, the messy, and the beautiful parts. I squeezed his hand, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. I don't say it enough, but thank you for being you. He smiled softly. I'm not going anywhere. Back home, things felt different, stronger, more real. One morning, Jamie woke me up with breakfast in bed, a rare, sweet gesture that made me feel cherished. As I ate, I looked up at him and said, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we make this official. Not just roommates, not just friends, partners. Jamie's eyes lit up, and he reached across the bed to hold my hand. I've been waiting to hear you say that. We laughed, and in that moment, it felt like all the chaos and uncertainty had led us here, to a place where we could be ourselves, together. Life is still messy, and there are days I still struggle with my past and my family. But with Jamie by my side, I know I can face whatever comes next. Because sometimes, the person who reads your journal is the one who helps you write the next chapter. A few months after that weekend getaway, life started to settle into a new normal. Not perfect, but ours. I'd had more honest conversations with my family than I ever thought possible, and while it wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation, it was progress. Jamie and I had officially moved past the just roommates phase and into something that felt like a partnership. We were navigating it together, one awkward, wonderful step at a time. One Saturday morning, Jamie knocked on my bedroom door with a sly grin and 2 cups of coffee. Come on, he said. I've got a surprise for you. I followed him downstairs, still half asleep, but curious. Outside, the sun was warm for early spring, and our little balcony was scattered with string lights Jamie had hung the night before. On the small table, there was a stack of my favorite books, a sketch pad, and my journal. I raised an eyebrow. You did you? Jamie laughed softly. I didn't touch her journal again. I wanted to give it back because it feels like the start of all this. Us. And maybe it's time we write new pages together. It hit me then. The journal, the late night talks, the sketches, the quiet moments, all of it was part of a story we'd begun without really planning it. A story of trust, vulnerability, and unexpected love. I took a deep breath and smiled. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to face it with you. Jamie reached out and took my hand, fingers curling around mine like they were made to fit perfectly. Same here, he said. We sat out on the balcony, sunlight warming our skin, and for a while we just existed in that quiet happiness, the kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be, with someone who sees you fully and still chooses to stay. Looking back, I realized that the moment Jamie read my journal wasn't just a breach of privacy, it was the beginning of something real. Because sometimes the people who stumble into your life and see your unfiltered self are the ones who help you become the person you're meant to be. And maybe that's the best kind of love, the kind that grows quietly out of honesty, patience, and the courage to share even the pages you thought no one would ever read.